In the immortal words of the patron saint of the malapropism, it's deja vu all over again. That's because this Mad Musings is talking about Imperium Maledictum, the latest 40k RPG from Cubicle 7. This game is clearly inspired by the 40k RPG that started it all, Dark Heresy. That one was a flawed masterpiece that suffered from rules that didn't do the setting justice, but added so much to the lore that channels like Luton, Voldemort, and Wolflord Rowe owe everyone who worked on it a beer, or more appropriately a case. Imperium Maledictum tries to follow in Dark Heresy's footsteps, with similar mechanics, but updated to fix many of the flaws. They also added many of their own touches to make this game their own rather than just a simple remake. But does it stand on its own? Or has the student failed to surpass the master? I'm Mr. Welch, and let's get ready to purge some filthy Xenos. I can't talk about Imperium Maledictum without making numerous comparisons to Dark Heresy. It's just not possible. The game keeps the same stats, as Games Workshop hasn't changed their stat line since Rogue Trader. The original one, not the really awesome RPG that I own all the books to. They use percentile mechanics, have fate points, treat wounds like a blade of armor, and also have corruption points. Character creation has multiple common steps, as both are a template system where you pick the aspects of your past to finish off your character generation. There's no mistaking this game as a 40k product, and they don't stray far from the original design. Dark Heresy had numerous mechanical flaws. Combat was a grind, the psychic rules were brutally unforgiving, and the economics could best be described as enforced poverty. And the alternate level system was about as balanced as an orc weird boy after his 9th shot of fungal beer. People played it for the expanded lore in spite of the rules. It wasn't a game where you got used to your characters. So at least the Imperium Maledictum designers knew what had to be fixed when they started this project. First, the technicals, because the game designers love having their names read aloud. Imperium Maledictum came out in 2023. The senior producer of the game is credited as Podrick Murphy. The creative director is Emmett Byrne. Cover art is by Alvaro Jimenez Hernandez. And a small army of designers, writers, and artists worked on this 368-page brick. To compare, Dark Heresy is about 30 pages longer. There is a double page of the new sector inside both covers, and you need D10s to play. Editing looks sharp, as I don't see any major issues with the layout. Is it sad that that last part is now something that deserves praise rather than just being expected? The core concept of the game is that characters are agents in the employ of a patron that has them going all over the Mccarius sector, doing all sorts of adventures such as purging filthy Xenos, purging heretics, and knitting exciting underwear if asked. This does expand the games from its Dark Heresy roots, where the players all worked for an Inquisitor doing Inquisition things. This opens up all manners of adventures rather than just going from mystery to mystery before the big fight starts, and then most of the characters die because this is the definitive game of the Grimdark Darkness, so the Grimdark future. The players build their initial characters, set up their history, then everybody gets recruited by their patron, and the adventures start. And this is my bias showing, but major props for setting this in the Mccarian sector. This is the place that is sacred to all Iggy players, where the biggest, baddest bone daddy of the Imperial Guard, the one, the only, Lord Solar Mccarius, showed all those filthy Xenos there was nowhere in the galaxy they were safe, even adjacent to the galaxy. This one named wonder recaptured 700 worlds for the Imperium in the space of just a few years, something that takes Space Marines decades to do. And I checked, he doesn't have a first name. In all the official lore, he's just Mccarius. This guy is the McLovin of 40k. All Imperial Guard players know his name and his exploits, from the stoic Praetorians to the even more stoic Mordians, to the somehow way more stoic Necromundan Spiders. Then again, they are Van Sar stock. You can't look at that emblem and tell me that the Van Sar didn't supply troops for the Spiders. Especially since their lore clearly states they are considered prime Imperial Guard recruitment targets when it's time to go to war. Oh yeah, plus the highly overrated Cadenss, who managed to lose the most heavily defended planet in the entire galaxy to a guy that's already failed 12 times in a row, and he couldn't even keep his arms on most of those times. Yeah, they respect him too. I'm not saying the Cadenss don't deserve their reputation, I'm just saying nobody ever says Valhalla stands, because they don't have to be reminded. Where was I? Oh yeah, reviewing this book. Character creation is really simple. Pick your planet, pick your faction, and your duty to it, then pick your role and you're done. Factions are your original job, and duties are a subcategory of it. So if you picked Imperial Guard, and no, I'm not calling it Astra Militarum, the only reason they have that name is Games Workshop can't copyright Imperial Guard because Napoleon Bonaparte beat them to it. So you had to make up something to slap the copyright on. Where was I? Oh yeah, Imperial Guard. If you pick them as your faction, you can take the default options or be a scout, a trooper, or a melee specialist. Then add up all your bonuses and extra abilities given to you, and away you go. The only rolling you get to do is your stats, and if you don't like them, you get to re-roll, but you lose bonus starting XP. That's an interesting mechanic, and I rather do like it. You will notice that there's several options in Dark Heresy that just aren't there in Imperium Maledictum. For world selections, you don't have Imperial or Death worlds, which seems to be an odd omission, as the first is the most common world found in 40k, and the last is one of the most famous. But it does add the Schola Progenium world. Character classes are more nebulous compared to the original. Many of the original classes are now presented in your faction. Scum is not a class. It now falls under the Infractionist faction, and you can be a Hiver, Fixer, or Ganger if you want to specialize. The roles break down to the Talky one, the Fighty one, the Sneaky one, the Smart one, the Psychic one, and the Fanatical one. This does let you mix and match your overall job and how you do it. A Valhallan Ice Warrior can now be an Officer, Sniper, Door Kicker, Tinkerer, an Attached Psyker, or the guy that spends all of his time talking to his bayonet while he sharpens it. This opens up a whole host of options for your characters, even if some of the choices aren't a good fit with one another. It gives you your rules for your patron first, rather than teaching character creation, an order that I'm seeing more often with quest giver rules ahead of how to play the game. That's not something I'm fond of. You pick or roll your patron with all their advantages or disadvantages. There's charts on determining the odds of which faction comes from what world, but I suggest you just pick these options. In fact, many of the random tables seem unnecessary, as these are things you don't want left to chance. The patron is the biggest one. This one's going to define the campaign. It's not something you want to roll on a chart to discover, especially not at the start of the game. This should be discussed at character generation, because it's going to determine what kind of characters the players are going to make. One major change is that Imperium Maledictum is a stat skill system instead of the level system of old. That is definitely an improvement, as the limited number of levels restricted character development, as you had to unlock the abilities to buy specific improvements. There's no class skills in Imperium Maledictum, which is something I will not complain about if you've seen any of my videos about D&D 3rd Edition. In the old days, if you wanted to order a skill off the menu, you had to negotiate a price with the Game Master. Here you just spend the points and you've got it. You do start off with a limited number of skills enforced by your backgrounds, but if you want to veer off from that, it's completely allowed. So you can easily learn the Eldar language to properly explain to them as they lay there with your bayonet in their chest that your girlfriend is going to love the necklace you give them that you made from that shiny bauble the filthy Xenos has on their forehead. Assuming you don't incinerate their corpse to avoid contamination. While you start rather focused on one style of play, you can veer into new territory pretty easy. With no level limits, this means your characters can reach higher physical and mental peaks, as compared to just what you rolled plus 20 with Dark Heresy. The human max for all abilities without augmentation is 60, though the XP cost increases at higher levels, rather than a single set price like in Dark Heresy. The chart does go higher, giving hopes that in later expansions there's going to be subhumans, space marines, and even filthy Xenos. However, skills are just restricted to just 20 points and broken down into 4 ranks of 5 instead of 2 ranks of 10. Combat is greatly streamlined, cutting down on quite a number of the number crunching that plagued the original version. Melee combat reverts back to dueling dice instead of a static test, meaning 2 die rolls for every test. Missile combat is a single test, either you get hit or you don't. Weapon damage is a set amount. You get bonuses for rolling well, but a lasgun is always going to do a base 4 points of damage. Veterans will notice there's a few weapons missing from the equipment list, as all the primitive weapons are gone. Then again, I don't think many people went through the original game using a musket. There are a few mechanical changes with levels of success. You still get bonuses for rolling under your target number. If you manage to beat the test and roll doubles, it becomes a critical success. Failure with doubles is a fumble, and obviously that's a bad thing. Damage types are gone, so are the rather specific and brutal critical hit charts. Now bolters and flamers do the same criticals. No more taunting the bad guys when you get a 10 plus critical hit on the worst possible kind of death on a good roll. But considering the damage capacity of weapons is much lower, that's to be expected. Damage location is slightly tweaked. In Dark Heresy, you reversed the order to check the location. Now you just use the ones die to check on that chart. Imperium Maledictum gets around the large number of modifiers from the old days by using advantage and disadvantage, which is fairly rare for a non-D20 game. At least I've never seen it in a percentile system. For these mechanics, if you have advantage, you decide which of the dice is the tens die, letting you roll the lowest possible result. If you have disadvantage, the dice arrange themselves to the highest number possible. If you roll doubles, you're screwed, but at least you manage to crit or fumble, so there's no escaping the dice god final judgment on that one. The game has a rather unique morale system with the superiority rules. These are points you get for gaining critical information about the enemy, finding a strategic location to attack, or by eliminating key members of the opposition. If you gain more superiority than their reserve trait, the bad guys will break and run, surrender, or fight to the death if they have no other option. If the party takes losses or suffers critical hits, they lose superiority points. In some cases, you can win a fight before it starts just by getting enough information in the best position, and the mooks will surrender or book it before the shooting starts. Bad guys can actually be smart for a change. The psychic system is brand new and like nothing from the previous games, where now you roll your psychic abilities to try and hit a target number, with each use accumulating psychic points. These are bad, and they can cause very bad things to happen. If you gain too many, there's a chance you roll on the really bad psyker chart, and that's how you get demons. You don't want demons. You can bleed off your psychic points by taking an action to try and make a successful test, and if you succeed, you get rid of the points and only have to roll on the not as bad psyker chart, which will only get you demons if you're already way overloaded with psychic energy. After the battle, you can bleed off all your psychic energy with a simple roll on the not as bad psyker chart with no chance of getting demons. A strange thing is if you get a psychic phenomenon in an area and then get the same result twice without the first one expiring, then the effect becomes permanent. The odds of that happening are slim, but it's neat that you can permanently mess up the battleground because you, the lean, mean demon summoning machine, mess up twice in a row. Do you want commissars? Because that's how you get commissars. The game does make heavy use of talents, though like skills, all talents are largely opened up to everyone. They tend to come with prerequisites. The more powerful the talent, the more skills and other talents you're going to need. Oddly enough, all talents, regardless of power level, cost 100 XP without exception. And while it's a completely open system in what you can take, the character creation will give you a head start for certain other talents, as they will fill out the prerequisites for the other ones that you might be inclined to pursue. These aren't mandatory, but they do give you a nudge in that direction and save you some XP in the process. The game doesn't worry too much about what happens after your mission, instead of turning that into downtime events, which is a curious choice since having multiple patrons should lead to customized events, or at least modifiers based on the campaign. A rogue trader's crew is going to have different escapades compared to an inquisitor's retinue. This might be changed in future supplements, it just seemed an odd choice to me for a game with much broader scope of adventures. There's also individual endeavors, most of which are pick a skill test, make it, and then gain a mechanical benefit in the next adventure. Things like making money, gaining a temporary fate point, crafting an item, things like that. The equipment list is about what you'd expect from a 40k game. Compared again to Dark Heresy, it's about the same number of items. It adds a few things, it drops a few things, but nothing glaring was added or removed. Encumbrance is done by a rating system rather than weight, based on your strength and your toughness traits. You have enough capacity to kit out your heavy fighters without them leaving behind any normal equipment. I didn't see any rules for drugs, so no Friends-on, Slaughter, or Spook for your scummer types. And while the pay rates in the Mccarius sector are much better than the paltry sums you made in the Calyxus sector, inflation is apparently rampant. A bolt pistol costs you 250 thrones in Gunmetal City, but back in Proteus Secundus, it's a staggering 3,000 solars. So either the dark times of the current Imperium have wrecked the economy, or the solar doesn't have the same purchasing power. This does mean the more exotic weapons are going to be mostly scavenged from bad guys or quest rewards. There's no buying a multi-melta off the rack. Granted, those aren't in the game yet, and that's probably for the best, considering how overpowered they were in previous games. Still, using Hell's Halitosis to melt multiple people is a fond memory. The primary reason why Dark Heresy was successful and launched multiple sequels, aside from the fact that the 40k community was jonesing for an official 40k RPG, any 40k RPG, they would have taken one written on a napkin in binary at this point, was the background. It gave us a look at the inner workings of a game world that until then had just hinted how dark it was. And it didn't disappoint. This does raise the question of how Imperium Maledictum compares. Time to jump into the background. It gives you an overview of the origins of the Mccarian Crusade and the Imperium in general. This is set after the events of the Cadenss screwing the whole galaxy by getting their planet blown up, though the Mccarian sector is far from the giant rift bisecting the galaxy. It gives brief mention of the Ultramarine Primarch, Rowboat Girlyman, and how he's the one running the Imperium now, but this summary and information is known to anyone halfway familiar with 40k. There's a discussion of each of the factions in the sector with details on how they operate, their effectiveness in the area, their place of power, and some adventure hooks tacked on at the end. The influence rules affect how you interact with each of these, letting you pull favors if you can get it high enough. So if you're a scummer who really wants a bolt gun, get chummy with a rogue trader or an Adeptus Munitorium scribe. These entries are brief, and they're obviously going to be expanded upon in future works. You wouldn't release a book this size and not follow it up with a ton of supplements. Yeah, so about that. This game came out in 2023. It's 2025. There are exactly 0 physical supplements that I could find for sale other than the core book. The Inquisition Player's Guide, the Inquisition's GM's Guide, the Requisition Guide, they all have pre-order next to them when you try to buy one on the website. They all have PDFs, but I'm an analog gamer. Given the choice between a physical copy and a computer file, I'll take the book 100% of the time. 200% of the time if I'm giving one as a gift. The first supplement came out 5 months ago. 2 more have come out since then, but they're all in PDF. I can't support my friendly local game store with a PDF. I can't walk through a store looking for something interesting and pick up a PDF. The release schedule for this game is glacial, and that flaw has killed many a promising game. That gripe out of the way, the mechanics in Imperium Maledictum are far superior to that of those of Dark Heresy. The massive number of modifiers that turned the predecessor into a math lesson every time you wanted to shoot a filthy Xenos are gone. You can play a Psyker without the 10% chance of doing horrible things to the party every time you want to read someone's mind. Character creation is far more freeform and open than the strict and rigid class system that Dark Heresy inflicted upon you. Granted, a strict and rigid class system does seem very 40k themed, though it does make for some unfun character generation. This also means that the alternate ranks are gone, which, while I understand it, it's sad to see many of those go because their lore was perfect. That's my biggest issue I have with the game. It's clean, it's sanitized, it's bright, it's easy to read. That's normally a good thing. But this is the grimdark darkness of the grimdark future. Part of the majesty of Dark Heresy and the Final Fantasy games line was it felt dirty. It felt used. You could get tetanus from flipping the pages. Everything looked grimy. The descriptions of locations were less educational and more soul-crushing. The lore section of Dark Heresy is a masterclass in theming your book to the source material. If you're making up your own book, pick up that core book and look to see how they did it. In Imperium Maledictum, every page is block paragraphs on a cream background with the occasional chart or illustration. Dark Heresy put its lore sections on scrolls and data slates, and then the text on them was slightly askew and switched from print to cursive. It was dirty, it was jarring, it was glaring. It broke your immersion and made you focus on the new information. It was perfect for a 40k role-playing game. The 30 additional pages that Dark Heresy spent on its background and lore compared to Imperium Maledictum are glaring. I know it's an editorial choice, and it could have backfired badly on Fantasy Flight games if they made their books unreadable. But taking chances is what separates the memorable books from the shelf-sitters. One reason why you can't find Fantasy Flight games 40k source books for less than double the price in most places is because that lore revolutionized the setting. They took a chance. They gave us a deep dive into a world that the more we knew about it, the less we wanted to. It was an equal balance of grim and dark, and you were squishy pawns trying to keep that balance. You were supporting a fascist theocracy, and the game provided more than enough evidence to make clear that compared to everybody else, you were the good guys. Instead of pages of depressing yet fascinating background of the various worlds of the sector, Imperium Maledictum gives you 2 to 3 paragraphs of information and a plot hook on each world. Wash, rinse, repeat. That's Imperium Maledictum. I might have been harsh on the lore aspects, but I will tell you flat out the mechanics are far better than the game it's replacing. It's much more open with the options given by the Patron mechanics, and combat is less of a slog with the simple ability to actually hit things, though I will never be a fan of the dueling dice mechanics. The fewer times you have to roll to do something, the better. Then again, this is a 40k book. Where the game lags is the background of the sector. The lore it provides is wide, but shallow. You will know something about every single world, but not enough of them to make them interesting. The lack of physical support is concerning, as if you can't put books on shelves, people can't buy it. You can always do what other players have done, and that's use the Imperial Maledictum mechanics with the Dark Heresy setting. Cubicle 7 has PDFs for both. Next Mad Musings, I'm looking at one of my greatest what-if games, the Doctor Who RPG by FASA. Not to be confused with Doctor Who RPG by Cubicle 7. The is important. Can it capture the charm of the classic serials? No, not really. But as a diehard Whovian, even despite the most recent series, I have to talk about it. Until then, remember that despite its phenomenal success rate, the Multi-Melta is not the solution to all my problems.